Ethan Cole settled into seat 14C, the soft hum of Flight 228's engines filling the cabin as the plane lifted smoothly off the runway at John F. Kennedy International Airport. Around him, passengers fumbled with tablets, smartphones, and bags, unaware that the quiet man in the aisle seat was more than he appeared. To them, he was just another traveler, a middle-aged man with neatly trimmed hair, casual jacket, and a calm expression. A book lay unopened on his lap, a window seat untouched, and yet his eyes betrayed a quiet intensity, scanning the cabin with subtle awareness. The flight attendants moved down the aisle, exchanging cheerful greetings and ensuring seat belts were fastened. Ethan nodded politely to a young woman offering a blanket, his hand brushing against a small, sleek device concealed beneath his jacket. It was an earpiece, custom-made, tuned to frequencies most people couldn't even imagine. He adjusted it lightly, listening, though he hadn't spoken in years to anyone on this channel. The faint static whispered fragments of signals he recognized instantly: military codes, encrypted chatter, patterns of communication once drilled into him during long, grueling missions. He leaned back and closed his eyes for a brief moment, taking in the gentle sway of the aircraft. The clouds outside stretched in a vast white sheet, the sun glinting faintly off the wingtip. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary. But Ethan knew better. Somewhere in the distance, radar screens flickered with anomalies. Unseen eyes were already tracking Flight 228, and those watching had no idea that the passenger in 14C had once been a ghost in the sky. A man whose very call sign, Ugly 6, was whispered with caution in Air Force circles. Memories of the past stirred. Ethan had been a U.S. Air Force test pilot, a man who once navigated experimental jets through classified missions so secret that even the military pretended he didn't exist after his early retirement. His call sign had been Ugly 6, a moniker earned during risky, high-altitude operations that pushed aircraft and pilot to their absolute limits. But that life was supposed to be behind him. Officially, he no longer existed. He had vanished after a mission gone tragically wrong, leaving a co-pilot dead and a legacy erased. And yet, now, as Flight 228 climbed toward 35,000 feet, he could feel the old instincts stirring, the ones that had saved lives in impossible situations, warning him that calm skies were often the most dangerous. Passengers chatted idly, oblivious to the storm brewing hundreds of miles above. Children played with headphones too large for their heads. Couples nibbled on snacks, scrolling through in-flight entertainment. Ethan's gaze lingered briefly on a man across the aisle, engrossed in his phone. The man's phone glitched, a strange static audible for a split second. Ethan's hand twitched instinctively, his mind racing through possibilities. The signal wasn't random. It was a trace of something military-grade, something dangerous, something he recognized from the classified missions that had ended his career. He glanced down at the device hidden beneath his jacket. He had not meant for it to broadcast. It was a receiver, meant to passively monitor frequencies, not to send a call sign that could trigger an immediate military response. Yet somehow it had activated. A fragment of his old identity, once buried and erased, was now floating over the airwaves. And he knew that someone, somewhere, was listening. The cabin lights dimmed slightly for in-flight service, and the plane tilted gently as it leveled off. Ethan's attention shifted briefly to the windows, the endless sea of clouds below, and the thin curve of the horizon above. The sky looked calm, peaceful, utterly innocent, but that illusion was dangerous. He could feel it, the way a predator senses a storm before it arrives. High above, military jets were already moving into position, scanning the airspace, waiting for a signature, a signal, a single human error that could trigger an engagement. And that human error, if it happened, could cost hundreds of lives. Ethan's thoughts drifted back to the day he left the Air Force. It had been quiet, ceremonial, but empty in a way that lingered. After the accident that claimed his co-pilot, his reputation had been shredded in classified documents, buried under bureaucratic language that labeled him unfit for duty. He had disappeared into civilian life, changed his name, and accepted anonymity. The world had moved on without him, and for years, that had been enough. But now, with Flight 228 slicing through restricted airspace, that past was catching up. He adjusted his posture, stretching subtly. Flight attendants passed, offering drinks and smiles, oblivious to the tension building silently in the sky. A stewardess paused briefly near him, asking if he wanted coffee. Ethan smiled politely, shaking his head. "Not right now," he murmured. Her eyes lingered for a fraction of a second, sensing his calmness, but not understanding it. The quiet passenger had a presence that few noticed, but in a matter of minutes, the air around him would thrum with intensity beyond ordinary comprehension. A sudden shudder rattled the cabin slightly. Turbulence, perhaps, but Ethan's ears picked up something else. A faint pulse beneath the static. Irregular, foreign, dangerous. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Every muscle, every neuron was aware, recalling drills and exercises from a life that had seemed long over. He checked the earpiece once more. The signal was growing stronger. Somewhere above and around the flight path, jets were converging. Military grade, supersonic, precise. And they were closing in fast. He glanced at the captain across the cockpit's glass, imagining what she must be thinking. To her, he was just a passenger like everyone else. But he knew the difference between ordinary aircraft and those that could change history with a single misstep. Flight 228 was now in the path of forces unseen, and Ethan Cole was no longer just a traveler. He was the only one who could recognize the danger, the only one who could act in time. The quiet passenger's hands rested lightly on his lap, but inside, a storm of readiness was awakening. He remembered his call sign Ugly Six, a name once spoken with caution, respect, and sometimes fear in secure military hangars. It was a name that now lingered somewhere on a military frequency, unrecognized by anyone except those trained to respond. Somewhere, pilots were receiving that signal and pausing in disbelief. A man who should have been erased from the records had just announced himself to the skies in a way he could never have intended. The plane leveled, engines humming steadily. Ethan adjusted his jacket, hands steady, gaze forward. Passengers whispered, smiled, and settled into their routines, unaware of the life-or-death drama about to unfold above the clouds. Ethan knew that in minutes he would be forced out of anonymity, forced to step into a world he thought he had left behind. The quiet passenger was about to become a legend once more, and the skies above would never forget the name Ugly Six. And as Flight 228 cut through the endless blue, a faint radio ping reached Ethan's earpiece. It was a recognition, a heartbeat, a call. Somewhere above, somewhere dangerous, someone had heard the signal. Ethan Cole, the man who was only a passenger, leaned back slightly and whispered to himself, "Let's see who's listening." The hum of Flight 228's engines filled the cabin, a gentle vibration that should have been comforting. Yet for Ethan Cole, comfort was a memory, long buried beneath years of training, missions, and survival drills. The faint static in his earpiece had grown stronger, a pulse echoing in rhythm with the hidden danger approaching from the skies above. He shifted subtly, ensuring no passenger noticed the alert in his eyes. To the outside world, this was just another transatlantic flight. To him, it was a warning that would determine the fate of everyone on board. Captain Maria Jensen had just finished issuing another routine announcement, reminding passengers to remain seated and fasten their belts. She smiled, her voice calm, betraying none of the unease she felt as she monitored the cockpit instruments. Something didn't sit right. The flight path, perfectly mapped for hours, showed subtle deviations. Minor blips on the radar flickered, but the system dismissed them as false positives. The calm of the sky was deceptive. Turbulence would normally account for irregularities, but the air was smooth. Too smooth. Ethan's gaze drifted toward the windows. Sunlight reflected off the wings in sharp flashes, cutting through the cabin with a gentle brilliance that belied the tension he felt. He could almost sense the presence of something else, machines designed to kill, moving silently in pursuit, eyes locked on their target. 2 F-35 jets were converging, following Flight 228 with uncanny precision. No civilian system could detect them. Only he could hear the fragmented chatter over his encrypted earpiece, the ghostly static of pilots scanning for anomalies. The passengers remained blissfully unaware. A child laughed in the row ahead, tugging at a parent's sleeve, asking endless questions about movies, cartoons, and snacks. Couples adjusted headphones, immersed in in-flight entertainment. Ethan's eyes flicked to each one, memorizing details, faces, and positions. If the worst happened, he needed to know everything. The quiet passenger was suddenly the only line of defense between hundreds of innocents and the lethal machines, drawing closer with every second. Then came the first unmistakable signal, a transmission on a military frequency, sharp, urgent, and clipped. Ethan froze. His heart rate increased just enough to feel it in his chest, though outwardly he remained composed. The call sign Ugly 6 echoed in his mind, a name he had not uttered aloud in years. That name carried authority, fear, and history. And now, accidentally, it had broadcast over the frequency when his earpiece, accidentally triggered, tapped into the channel. In the F-35 cockpits, LT, Ryan Davis and his wingman stared at their radar displays. The call sign was impossible. Ugly 6? The airspace had been clear of any known assets, but now a signature appeared, matching a pilot long believed gone. "Do you see that?" Davis whispered, tone-tight with disbelief. His wingman adjusted controls, scanning for any visual confirmation. "It can't be. That call sign's been erased. It's gone," the other muttered, voice strained. But the transponder confirmed it. An aircraft was active, transmitting, alive, and moving steadily at 35,000 feet. Back in the cabin, a sudden shudder passed through Flight 228, light but noticeable. Passengers glanced at each other, murmured softly, and clutched armrests. Ethan's eyes narrowed. This wasn't ordinary turbulence. It was the result of external forces, air displacement from supersonic jets maneuvering in close proximity. His training resurfaced instantly. Every muscle, every nerve, honed for emergencies he had hoped to leave behind, came alive. He began calculating trajectories, speed, and angles mentally, preparing for the possibility that the approaching jets were not here for a routine escort. Captain Jensen noticed the flicker on her instruments. A warning light blinked briefly, then disappeared. She frowned, consulting her co-pilot. "Radar anomaly," she muttered, voice low. "Probably a glitch, right?" The first officer shrugged, but unease lingered. The calm of the sky had begun to erode, replaced by a tension passengers could not yet feel. Ethan, meanwhile, remained seated, subtly manipulating his device, listening, analyzing. The fragmented chatter became clearer encrypted codes he recognized. Military communications meant for pilots in the field, pilots trained for scenarios involving life or death decisions. A sudden burst of radio static cut through the cockpit's frequency. Then a voice emerged, faint but unmistakable. "Identify yourself," it demanded. "This is an unauthorized flight. Respond immediately." The words were professional, clipped, precise military. Ethan's mind raced. The F-35s had visual lock, had tracked the signature to the aircraft, and were preparing to act. The passengers' ignorance of their peril made the situation even more tense. He adjusted his earpiece subtly, preparing to relay instructions, but hesitation lingered. Any misstep could trigger a deadly engagement. Minutes stretched like hours. The jets drew closer, engines producing a faint sonic vibration, barely perceptible to the untrained ear. Ethan's thoughts flicked back to the missions he had flown. High-risk sorties with experimental jets, top-secret assignments where one error meant death. He calculated the speed, altitude, and positioning of the approaching F-35s. They were precise, disciplined, deadly. But so was he, and he knew the protocols, the codes, the signs that could prevent a disaster. The quiet passenger in 14C was suddenly the only person capable of averting catastrophe. Then came the unintentional broadcast. Ethan's hand had brushed the hidden switch on his device. A single crisp transmission escaped into the military channel, speaking the words he had once lived by. Ugly 6. Airborne. In the F-35 cockpits, both pilots froze. Ugly 6? The name belonged to a man considered erased for a reason, but here it was again, alive and in the air. LT, Davis felt a chill. This can't be happening, he muttered. His wingman adjusted scanners, eyes widening. The signature matched historic flight data for a pilot believed dead. Back on the plane, the cabin remained unaware. Children giggled. Couples watched movies. Flight attendants moved up and down the aisles, distributing drinks and smiles. And yet, at the front, Captain Jensen noticed the subtle pressure of the aircraft, as if it sensed the approaching jets. She glanced at Ethan briefly. Something in his posture, his calm, almost too precise demeanor, told her there was more to this passenger than met the eye. Ethan adjusted his jacket, checking the earpiece again. The fragmented signal was clearer now, the military chatter decipherable, yet still cryptic. He began thinking quickly, devising a plan to avoid detection while preventing an accidental escalation. He wasn't here to engage, but he knew protocols, knew what actions would prevent the jets from treating Flight 228 as a hostile target. He had survived impossible missions before. Now, he had hundreds of lives relying on his expertise. The jets flanked the plane, positioning themselves with lethal precision. F-35s, silent predators in the sky, waited for confirmation, scanning for threats. Ethan leaned slightly forward, whispering to himself, "Stay calm. Stay invisible. They can't make a mistake here." A faint vibration ran through his fingers as he prepared to speak over the encrypted channel, knowing that one wrong word could provoke a catastrophic response. The quiet passenger, the man in 14C, was no longer quiet. He was awake, alert, and fully aware that the sky had become a battlefield. Outside the cabin, the sun reflected off the wings of the approaching jets, blindingly bright, yet precise in their tracking. Inside, Ethan's calm voice broke the tension slightly, whispering coded instructions into the earpiece. He knew the pilots were listening, even if they didn't yet recognize him. Ugly 6 had returned, whether anyone liked it or not, and the world above the clouds had just realized it. Ethan Cole's pulse was steady, his outward calm belying the storm inside. Flight 228 cut through the clouds with smooth precision, passengers unaware that their ordinary journey had transformed into a test of survival. Every instinct honed in years of high-altitude missions hummed beneath his skin. He knew the approaching F-35s were no routine escort. They were elite, trained to respond decisively to any anomaly, and they had just received a signal no one thought existed. Ugly 6 airborne. In the lead F-35, LT, Ryan Davis leaned closer to the heads-up display, disbelief etched across his face. He'd grown up hearing the legends of Ugly Six, a name whispered in training rooms, respected by pilots and feared by enemies. A test pilot whose missions were so secret that even official records had been scrubbed after a catastrophic accident. "It can't be real," he muttered under his breath, hand hovering over the COM switch. His wingman's jaw tightened. "Sir, that call sign?" "The file says he's been dead for 10 years. The jets approached carefully, maintaining formation, flanking Flight 228 without triggering panic or drawing attention. Davis's mind raced. The signatures matched historical data from decades-old missions. Flight patterns, maneuver styles, even a unique pressure signature in the air, caused by the pilot's adjustments. Ethan Cole's unmistakable mark. The F-35s had intercepted a phantom, a legend made flesh, and now they were confronted with proof that the ghost they'd studied and revered still existed. Back in the cabin, Ethan adjusted his earpiece subtly, monitoring the pilot's chatter without drawing attention. The flight attendants moved down the aisles, unaware of the tension above. He took in the ordinary faces of the passengers, children playing, couples sharing quiet conversation. Hundreds of lives were quietly hanging in the balance, their fate resting on split-second calculations and decades of forgotten training. His mind traced flight paths, velocity adjustments, and communication protocols in milliseconds, preparing to guide the F-35s through a scenario they had never anticipated. A passenger who was also a top-tier ex-military pilot. A sudden vibration ran through the cabin, subtle but telling. Turbulence. Perhaps, but Ethan recognized it for what it was. Air displacement from jets moving in precise intercept positions. He leaned slightly forward, whispering to himself as he ran mental calculations. The flight was within safe bounds, but any sudden movement could trigger defensive systems in the F-35s or the aircraft itself. A single wrong input, a misunderstood signal, and the plane could become a target. The encrypted chatter in his earpiece intensified. He had unintentionally broadcast his call sign. Ugly Six, a name meant to remain in legend, had escaped into the wrong channels. In the F-35 cockpits, both pilots stiffened. Davis's eyes darted across the display, confirming that the signature was authentic. "It's him," he whispered. "It has to be." His wingman nodded, fingers gripping controls as if to brace for something impossible. A real-time legend was airborne, alive, and controlling the situation without revealing his identity to anyone else. Ethan's thoughts flicked back to the events that had erased him from military records. A decade ago, a mission gone catastrophically wrong had left his co-pilot dead. Classified directives scrubbed the operation from all official documentation. He had been labeled unfit for duty, and his call sign, Ugly Six, was buried in secrecy. Today, though, that buried code had resurfaced unintentionally, with consequences that could extend far beyond Flight 228. He realized that even his careful anonymity was now compromised. The F-35 pilots debated their next move. Orders from command were clear: intercept, identify, neutralize threats. Yet this was no ordinary threat. The signal emanating from Flight 228 was sophisticated, precise, almost as if designed to communicate with elite pilots only. Davis's mind raced. Could a civilian aircraft really carry such a signature? Could someone on board manipulate systems so subtly yet so effectively? And most pressing, why would someone risk revealing Ugly Six? In the cabin, Ethan leaned slightly toward the aisle, casually adjusting his jacket while mentally preparing a plan. The passengers remained oblivious. One woman flipped through a magazine. A child hummed a tune in the row ahead. All seemed ordinary, but he knew the ordinary was a fragile illusion. High above, two jets waited, and the next few minutes would define whether Flight 228 remained intact or became an international incident. His own voice, calm, precise, had to guide this operation without revealing too much, ensuring the pilots recognized authority, but not threat. The static in his earpiece began forming words. Military terms he hadn't heard in years. Codes, designations, protocol numbers flowed faintly, almost cryptically. Ethan parsed them instantly. These pilots were scanning for a high-risk anomaly in restricted airspace, unaware that the anomaly they sought was sitting quietly in the cabin of Flight 228. He knew exactly what to say, exactly how to act to prevent escalation. A single misstep from him or from them could trigger a defensive response with catastrophic results. Flashback sequences haunted him briefly. Long nights in high-altitude jets, fingers gripping throttle levers, rapid calculations under extreme pressure. Missions designed to test the limits of aircraft and human endurance. His co-pilot, now gone, had relied on him to make decisions in milliseconds, a trust forged in life-and-death situations. Those lessons, painfully learned, were now returning to him, fully intact, as if no time had passed. The quiet passenger was about to demonstrate the relevance of decades-old expertise. Davis issued a terse command over the secure channel. Identify yourself immediately. State your intentions. The voice was authoritative, but cautious. The signal from Flight 228 flickered subtly in response, though no words were spoken. Ethan recognized the risk. Revealing himself outright could trigger a defensive strike. Yet withholding information entirely was equally dangerous. He took a calculated risk, preparing a response designed to signal competence and credibility without provocation. A faint smile crossed Ethan's face, almost imperceptible. He leaned slightly, manipulating his device carefully. Words formed, nearly silent, on the secure frequency. This is Ugly 6. Repeat. Ugly 6 airborne. In the cockpits of the F-35s, both pilots froze. Recognition, disbelief, and tension collided. Davis's hand hovered over controls, unsure whether to engage or trust what he was hearing. Historical data, simulations, even personal knowledge from training sessions confirmed it. The man known only as Ugly 6 erased, hidden, legendary was alive, airborne, and guiding a civilian aircraft through a scenario that could have become deadly. Ethan knew the gravity of the moment. Flight 228's passengers remained oblivious, laughing, chatting, or watching screens, unaware that their safety depended on one man's quick thinking and decades of hidden expertise. Outside, the F-35s adjusted their formation, careful, disciplined, waiting for confirmation of threat or compliance. Every move, every calculation, every decision could tilt the balance between life and catastrophe. Minutes passed. Ethan's mind remained razor-sharp, mapping angles, velocities, and signal patterns. He subtly guided Captain Jensen, preparing her to respond in ways that would satisfy the F-35s while keeping the passengers safe. The quiet passenger had become a coordinator, a living interface between elite military precision and unsuspecting civilians. For Davis and his wingman, the realization was staggering. A pilot long considered gone was orchestrating safety from within the aircraft itself. The call sign Ugly 6 was more than a name. It was a signal of competence, authority, and risk management at the highest level. They had encountered legends before, but never in real time, never while operating at the edge of civilian airspace, and never involving lives entirely outside their purview. As Flight 228 continued its journey, smooth and untroubled to the untrained eye, Ethan's mind raced ahead. He knew the F-35s were still wary, still poised for action. He had to prepare the next steps carefully, neutralizing threats, communicating authority without escalation, and protecting the lives of every innocent person aboard. The quiet passenger in 14C had returned to the skies, not as a legend in the shadows, but as the living key to an unfolding drama no one could predict. And somewhere above the clouds, in the sleek, deadly F-35 cockpits, pilots whispered to themselves, almost reverently, "Ugly Six. It's really him." The sun glinted off the wings of Flight 228, painting them with a golden hue, a deceptive serenity that belied the tension above. Ethan Cole remained seated, outwardly calm, yet every muscle in his body was coiled like a spring. The F-35s had flanked the plane, maintaining a perfect lethal formation, their pilots scanning with precision only decades of Air Force training could provide. To the passengers, the day was ordinary. To Ethan, it was anything but. Every second that passed without proper communication increased the risk exponentially. One wrong move could trigger a deadly engagement. Captain Maria Jensen felt the subtle pressure in the controls before she saw anything unusual on the instruments. Something in the air, slightly irregular turbulence, imperceptible deviations, made her uneasy. She checked the radar, but nothing alarming appeared. "Just the usual turbulence," she muttered, though her tone betrayed the doubt creeping in. Yet, instinctively, she felt a presence outside the plane, something disciplined, precise, and dangerous. It wasn't just the air currents. It was the F-35s, silently asserting their position without warning. In the lead F-35, LT, Ryan Davis adjusted his instruments, scanning the flight pattern. Every metric pointed to the same conclusion. This was no ordinary civilian aircraft. The broadcast of the call sign Ugly Six had confirmed it. The name carried authority, skill, and a history of near-mythical precision. "We need visual confirmation," Davis said quietly to his wingman. Both pilots' eyes darted to the horizon, searching for any indication, but the signal wasn't what it seemed. Their scanners picked up no unusual weapon systems, no drones, nothing illegal yet. The signature matched someone far beyond the ordinary. Ethan sensed their hesitation. The subtle changes in frequency, the adjustments in their approach, they were cautious because they recognized skill. And recognition meant danger. He needed to establish trust without escalating tension. One wrong syllable over the military frequency could mean the difference between life and death. He leaned slightly, fingers brushing the concealed earpiece, preparing to transmit. The choice of words had to be precise, authoritative, yet non-threatening. His past training dictated that hesitation could be fatal. A flash of sunlight reflected off the F-35 cockpit canopy, and Ethan caught the faintest glimpse of pilot eyes, suspicious, alert, calculating. He remained seated, outwardly calm, then whispered into the earpiece, "Flight 228 is civilian. Repeat, civilian. I am the pilot coordinating communications. Request verification." In the F-35 cockpits, both pilots froze. The voice over the secure frequency carried the unmistakable cadence and authority of someone highly trained. Davis whispered to himself, almost reverently, "That's him. Ugly Six." The words were incomprehensible in civilian terms, but the weight of the call sign resonated. The voice wasn't just authoritative, it was decisive, aware, and calculated. The pilots realized that if this was indeed Ugly Six, their instructions had to adapt. The anomaly was alive and capable. Back in the cabin, Captain Jensen noticed Ethan leaning slightly toward her. "Sir?" she asked softly, unsure why she addressed a passenger. Ethan's calm gaze met hers, steady and measured. "Follow my instructions exactly. Don't panic. Do not provoke the jets. Repeat every command as I say." Jensen hesitated, but something in his presence demanded obedience. She trusted him instinctively, though she had no idea why. Her hand hovered over the radio, ready to comply, aware that her decision could save lives. Ethan's thoughts raced. The F-35s weren't here to engage aggressively. They were waiting, cautious, testing signals, trying to confirm the legitimacy of the broadcast. If he miscalculated, they would fire. If he hesitated, the plane could become a target. He began issuing instructions subtly, guiding Jensen to respond in precise, coded phrases designed to communicate competence without provocation. The passengers were oblivious to the life-or-death negotiations happening just feet from them. The jets adjusted formation, wings glinting in the sunlight. Sensors and radar scanned every square inch of Flight 228. The lead pilot's finger hovered over the trigger, though no one wanted to engage prematurely. Davis's mind ran through simulations. What could a civilian pilot know that made a high-risk approach unnecessary? The frequency, the call sign, the calculated response, it all pointed to someone exceptional, someone who could neutralize a threat without aggressive engagement. He felt the surreal reality of following instructions from a ghost who had once disappeared from existence. Ethan leaned slightly back, signaling Jensen to relay his instructions. Maintain current altitude. Respond calmly to every query. Do not mention my call sign. Affirm aircraft identification in civilian terms, but remain compliant. Her voice, smooth but firm, transmitted over the channel exactly as he had instructed. The F-35s hesitated. Confirmation received. They recognized competence without threat. Ethan allowed himself a brief moment of relief, knowing that the most immediate danger had been averted. Yet the threat was not gone. Ethan knew someone had planted a rogue transmitter somewhere along Flight 228 systems. He could feel the faint interference, a pulse in the avionics that hinted at sabotage. The F-35 pilots had not detected it yet, but once the plane reached critical coordinates, the signal could trigger defensive protocols. He needed to locate and neutralize it discreetly, without alarming passengers or provoking the military jets circling them. Every move had to be subtle, precise, and effective. He glanced around the cabin. Children laughed, couples shared quiet conversation, and flight attendants moved up and down the aisles, completely unaware of the silent trauma. Ethan's hands brushed the concealed device in his jacket. It was time to act. Using his knowledge of military protocols and aviation electronics, he traced the faint pulse to the plane's maintenance bay, detecting anomalies in the communication systems. It wasn't just a rogue signal, it was a trap designed to make Flight 228 appear hostile to any intercepting jets. His voice, calm and controlled, guided Jensen through subtle adjustments in avionics and radio frequencies. Do not deviate, he whispered, though the words were directed more at the aircraft systems than the captain herself. The F-35s noticed minor frequency shifts, subtle yet deliberate. It was enough to signal to them that the civilian aircraft was being guided by someone capable, someone trained to prevent engagement rather than provoke it. Davis's hand eased slightly off the trigger. Trust was forming, fragile but real, between the ghost of a legendary pilot and the elite F-35 operators. Minutes stretched, tense and measured. The rogue signal's influence waned under Ethan's manipulations. Flight 228 stabilized further, engines humming with steady precision. Passengers remained blissfully unaware, entertained by screens, snacks, and conversation. Outside, the F-35s held formation, no longer poised to strike. Davis muttered quietly, almost in awe. I can't believe this. He's alive. He's really alive. His wingman shook his head, and controlling the situation without revealing himself. Unreal, Ethan allowed a brief, controlled exhale. The first confrontation, though subtle, had been a success. The rogue transmitter had been neutralized. The F-35 pilots satisfied that Flight 228 posed no immediate threat, and the passengers remained safe. Yet he knew this was only the beginning. Someone had tampered with the aircraft systems deliberately, and the broader danger remained. The skies above, once calm and inviting, had become a theater of hidden threats. The quiet passenger in 14C had assumed the role of guardian, intermediary, and operator, all without anyone noticing. He leaned back, scanning the cabin one final time. Passengers chatted, laughed, and slept peacefully. Captain Jensen glanced at him again, a subtle recognition in her eyes. You know what you're doing," she said quietly. Ethan gave a small nod, replying almost imperceptibly, "I've done this before. Trust me." Outside, the F-35s began to maintain a more relaxed formation, scanning, but no longer threatening. Above the clouds, the sun reflected on wings and fuselage, blindingly bright yet full of hidden danger. Flight 228 continued toward its destination, ordinary to all except those trained to perceive the subtle signals of threat, expertise, and legend. Ethan Cole remained calm, outwardly a passenger, inwardly vigilant, aware that every second could bring new challenges. Somewhere above, somewhere still unseen, additional forces might be converging. But for now, the immediate confrontation had passed. The legend of Ugly Six had resurfaced, commanding the skies without revealing itself, and ensuring that Flight 228 remained airborne, intact, and safe for the moment. And in the cockpits of the F-35s, LT, Davis whispered to himself again, a shiver running down his spine. "Ugly Six, you're real, and you're airborne." Flight 228 hummed steadily through the upper atmosphere, sunlight reflecting off the wings in sharp, golden flashes. Inside, passengers chatted, read, or watched movies, entirely unaware that their ordinary transatlantic journey had become a life-or-death operation. Ethan Cole remained calm, outwardly just another traveler, but beneath the surface, his mind raced. The rogue signal embedded in the aircraft's avionics wasn't just a glitch, it was a trap. One misstep, one unintentional transmission, and the F-35 circling them could interpret it as a hostile act. Hundreds of lives rested on his decades of experience and precise instincts. Captain Maria Jensen glanced nervously at her instruments. Something was off, though outwardly nothing had failed. She noticed subtle shifts in the plane's communication systems, faint irregularities that suggested interference. "Sir, do you see this?" she whispered, leaning toward Ethan. He gave a subtle nod. "Yes, someone tampered with the avionics. We need to isolate it before the jets interpret it as hostile. Stay calm. I'll guide you." His tone was calm but commanding, a subtle authority that left no room for hesitation. Above the clouds, the F-35s adjusted their formation, circling like predatory birds. LT? Ryan Davis maintained visual lock, his fingers lightly brushing the controls. Every instrument, every sensor, confirmed what he suspected. Flight 228 was not ordinary. Yet the aircraft remained intact, steady, almost as if guided by a hand invisible to all but the most trained eyes. Davis's voice, clipped over secure comms, broke the tension. "Identify the source of the signal, now." Ethan's eyes flicked to his concealed device. He traced the rogue signal through multiple channels, each more complex than the last. Years of classified training allowed him to bypass the safeguards, isolate the rogue transmitter, and neutralize it without alerting the F-35s or triggering any failsafe. The interference appeared to have originated during routine maintenance. Someone had planted it deliberately. The plan had been to provoke an engagement, but Ethan recognized it almost instantly. He worked quickly, calculating frequencies, adjusting subroutines, rerouting electronic pathways, all while ensuring the civilian cockpit instruments remained stable. He leaned toward Captain Jensen, whispering precise instructions. "Adjust the transponder settings. Minor fluctuations only. Respond exactly as I direct to the next F-35 communication. "Do not alarm passengers." She followed his instructions perfectly, her trust in him growing with each calm, precise directive. Ethan monitored the F-35 pilot's reactions through his earpiece, noting subtle relaxations in formation. The pilots, though skeptical, were slowly recognizing the skill of the person they had initially considered a potential threat. Outside, the F-35s repositioned, wings glinting like silver knives in the sunlight. Davies's eyes narrowed, scanning every angle. The rogue signal fluctuated slightly, a subtle indication of interference, but nothing catastrophic. Ethan had bought just enough time. The battle in the sky wasn't physical, yet it was a war of precision, timing, and electronic dominance. One wrong move by any party could trigger disaster. Yet, despite the danger, Ethan remained steady, calculating probabilities with decades of experience guiding him. Passengers remained blissfully unaware. A child tugged at a parent's sleeve, asking endless questions about cartoons. A couple shared a quiet laugh over a movie. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, offering drinks and smiles, oblivious to the silent war unfolding above their heads. Ethan glanced at each, memorizing faces, positions, and potential points of danger in the unlikely event of rapid evacuation. Every life mattered, and he would not allow panic to disrupt the delicate balance he was maintaining. The rogue signal flared briefly, a sharp spike in the avionics. Ethan recognized it immediately. The secondary transmitter had attempted to reconnect. If the F-35s interpreted this as aggressive interference, they could engage. He acted quickly, isolating the secondary signal and neutralizing it with precise electronic countermeasures. Minutes stretched into hours in his mind as he monitored the system, ensuring no residual effects remained. It was a delicate operation, invisible to all except the few who understood the stakes. Davis and his wingmen observed from their jets, noting subtle changes in the plane's electronic signature. "It's responding correctly," Davis muttered, disbelief evident in his voice. "Someone's actively controlling this. But it's not hostile. Whoever it is, they know what they're doing." The wingmen nodded, tension easing slightly. They adjusted formation to a less aggressive posture, but remained vigilant, fully aware that any misjudgment could reignite the threat. Ethan leaned slightly back, reassessing the situation. The immediate threat, the rogue signal, had been neutralized. But he knew the bigger picture was more complex. Someone had targeted Flight 228 deliberately, using sophisticated methods designed to provoke a military response. The F-35s were skilled, but the human element, the passengers, was unpredictable. He needed to maintain calm, control communications, and prepare for potential escalation. He whispered again to Captain Jensen, "Maintain current heading and altitude. Continue standard communication. Any deviation could be misinterpreted. We're safe for now, but stay alert." She nodded, hands steady on the controls. "Understood. You really know what you're doing." Ethan allowed himself a brief, private smile. "Decades of practice," he replied quietly. Outwardly, he remained calm. Inwardly, every nerve was taut, aware that the next challenge could arrive at any moment. Minutes passed. The F-35s continued escorting Flight 228, cautious but no longer threatening. The aircraft remained stable, the rogue signal neutralized, and the passengers blissfully unaware of the narrow brush with catastrophe. Ethan monitored every system, ensuring that no residual interference could cause a sudden escalation. He could feel the tension slowly ebb, though he remained vigilant. The skies were no longer immediately hostile, but he knew that this was only the beginning of a larger, hidden threat. Suddenly, another faint ping appeared on his earpiece, a secondary communication, this one more encrypted, more subtle. Someone was still tracking the plane. It wasn't aggressive, not yet, but it was a warning that the operation had observers beyond the F-35s. Ethan's mind raced, calculating possibilities. A rogue faction, a lingering threat from past classified missions, or an attempt to provoke a military response for political gain. He had to stay 2 steps ahead, thinking not only about the pilots above, but also about the hidden enemies still in play. The F-35 pilots adjusted formation once more, scanning for any sign of hostile intent. Davis's voice, low but tense, broke the silence. Whatever's controlling that plane, it's guiding it safely. It's like the passenger knows everything before we do. His wingman shivered, gripping controls tightly. The realization was unsettling. A civilian aircraft, under the guidance of a lone operator, was outmaneuvering military judgment without causing harm. Ethan allowed himself a controlled exhale. The rogue signal was neutralized, passengers were safe, and the F-35s were temporarily at ease. Yet he knew vigilance was required. Someone had engineered this scenario deliberately, and Flight 228 remained a potential target. For now, he had stabilized the situation. But the true test lay ahead, guiding the plane safely to its destination, maintaining civilian control, and keeping the legend of Ugly Six alive without revealing his identity further. The hum of the engines filled the cabin once more. Passengers continued their routines, entirely unaware of the silent battle above. Ethan's hands rested lightly on his lap, eyes scanning instruments and sky. The rogue signal was neutralized, but the fight for Flight 228 was only half won. Somewhere in the vast expanse of the Atlantic, hidden threats still lingered, waiting for the slightest misstep. Ethan Cole, the quiet passenger in 14C, remained vigilant, fully aware that his unique skills were the only thing keeping hundreds alive. And high above, in the glinting cockpits of the F-35s, Ryan Davis whispered again. He's not just a passenger. He's a pilot, a legend, and he's saving lives we can't even see. Flight 228 sailed steadily through the upper atmosphere, but to Ethan Cole, every second carried weight. He scanned the instruments, noting subtle irregularities, traces of interference, faint anomalies in the communication channels that hadn't been present moments ago. Someone was still attempting to manipulate the plane, though the initial rogue signal had been neutralized. The danger wasn't gone. It had simply become more covert, lurking in the shadows of electronic systems. Captain Maria Jensen glanced at him, uncertainty in her eyes. "Sir, another spike?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded, without looking away from the instruments. "Yes, someone is attempting to regain access to the avionics. Stay calm. Do not engage any emergency procedures unless instructed." His voice was calm, but carried an authority that left no room for argument. Jensen followed his instructions precisely, her trust in the quiet passenger absolute. Above them, the F-35s adjusted their positions, flanking the plane with precision. LT, Ryan Davis, had maintained a visual lock since the initial encounter. He and his wingman monitored every nuance of Flight 228's response. The rogue signal was gone, but the subtle adjustments in frequency, altitude, and transponder readings suggested an unseen hand still manipulated events. "There's something we're missing," Davis muttered. "It's not hostile, but it's clever. Too clever." Ethan's mind raced. The spike indicated a secondary attempt to compromise the aircraft systems, likely aimed at creating a false threat to provoke a defensive engagement. Whoever had orchestrated this knew about the F-35's positions and the potential for international complications. His experience with classified missions gave him the insight to recognize patterns that civilians, or even most military operators, would miss. Every calculation, every adjustment he had made earlier was part of a larger sequence, a puzzle he needed to solve before it became deadly. He leaned subtly toward the aisle, pretending to stretch while his hands worked under the seat to reroute communication channels. His device, a compact, concealed unit, was capable of analyzing frequencies in real time, detecting anomalies, and countering attempts at unauthorized access. Each tap and adjustment required precision. Any error could trigger an automatic protocol, making the plane appear hostile to the F-35s above. For Ethan, this was familiar territory, a delicate dance between human skill and technological warfare. The passengers remained oblivious. A child laughed, a couple shared a quiet conversation, and the flight attendants moved with practiced efficiency through the aisles. Outside, sunlight glinted off the wings, masking the tense choreography unfolding in the sky. One wrong transmission, one unintended signal, and Flight 228 could become the center of a military incident. Ethan's decades of experience in high-risk test missions made him the only person capable of maintaining this balance. Davis's F-35 cockpits were tense but observant. Every instrument, every electronic readout, confirmed the plane's stability, yet the subtle adjustments were unmistakable to trained eyes. "It's him," Davis whispered to his wingman, awe and concern mingling in his voice. "The passenger. He's controlling the situation, and he's preventing disaster." His wingman nodded, eyes wide, realizing that the man on board, Flight 228, was operating with skill and authority far beyond anything in civilian aviation. Ethan traced the interference to a maintenance port concealed behind the plane's rear cargo area. It was sophisticated, designed to remain undetected by casual inspection, and capable of broadcasting faint signals to manipulate avionics. Someone had planned this meticulously, exploiting the gap between civilian oversight and military readiness. He crouched subtly, reaching the panel without attracting attention, and began neutralizing the hidden device with deft, precise movements. A sudden beep in his earpiece indicated partial success. The secondary signal was being suppressed, but traces of residual interference remained. Ethan knew that time was critical. The F-35s could misinterpret even minor anomalies as a hostile threat. He adjusted routing protocols and implemented subtle electronic countermeasures, diverting any residual signals into a harmless loop. The plane's system stabilized. Flight 228 was secure for the moment. Above, Davis and his wingman observed the subtle changes in the plane's signature. It was deliberate, controlled, and highly precise. "He's neutralizing it," Davis said quietly. "The passenger is actively preventing escalation. Incredible." His wingman shivered, gripping the controls tightly. The realization was humbling. A civilian aircraft, under the guidance of a lone operator, was outmaneuvering military judgment without causing harm. Ethan straightened, assessing the situation. The rogue device was disabled. The F-35s satisfied that Flight 228 posed no immediate threat, and the passengers remained blissfully unaware. Yet he knew the broader threat persisted. Someone had orchestrated this entire scenario deliberately, with a level of planning that suggested insider knowledge of both civilian and military operations. He had neutralized the immediate danger, but the true mastermind remained unknown and potentially more dangerous than anything in the skies above. He leaned toward Captain Jensen once more. "Stay on course. Maintain current altitude and heading. Do not deviate. The immediate threat is neutralized, but more interference may appear. Trust my instructions and act only as I direct." Jensen's hands gripped the controls, her gaze steady. "Understood," she replied, confidence growing with every clear directive. Minutes passed. Flight 228 remained stable, the rogue device neutralized, and the F-35s continued their careful escort. Outside, the sun reflected off the wings, serene and deceptive. Inside, Ethan monitored every system, every signal, every subtle fluctuation. He knew the danger was far from over. The rogue device was just the beginning. The real threat was still concealed, waiting for an opening. Suddenly, another faint ping appeared in his earpiece, a more subtle, encrypted communication, almost invisible to standard scanning. Someone was still monitoring Flight 228, their intentions unclear, but likely malicious. Ethan recognized the pattern immediately. It wasn't an accidental interference. This was deliberate surveillance, designed to provoke errors and potentially compromise the aircraft. The true challenge had just revealed itself, and he would need every skill he had to counter it. Davis and his wingmen adjusted formation once more. The signal from Flight 228 remained calm, controlled, and precise, yet subtle enough to suggest vigilance. "The passenger knows exactly what he's doing," Davis whispered. "He's orchestrating this entire operation without revealing himself." Incredible. His wingman nodded, realization dawning. This isn't just a civilian aircraft. It's a command post in disguise. Ethan allowed a brief, controlled exhale. The immediate threat was neutralized, but he remained vigilant. Someone had deliberately targeted Flight 228, exploiting the gap between civilian oversight and military readiness. The skies were no longer just a transit corridor. They had become a battlefield of hidden forces, unseen manipulations, and silent calculations. The quiet passenger in 14C had assumed the role of guardian, operator, and strategist, all without alerting the passengers or provoking the F-35s. Flight 228 continued through the upper atmosphere, stable and secure for now. Ethan's eyes scanned the instruments, his mind calculating probabilities, potential threats, and countermeasures. Every second mattered. The rogue device was gone, but the invisible enemy remained. He knew that the real challenge was only beginning, identifying the mastermind, preventing further interference, and guiding Flight 228 safely to its destination. And high above, in the F-35 cockpits, LT, Ryan Davis whispered again, awestruck. "Ugly Six. He's not just controlling the plane. He's controlling the sky." Flight 228 glided through the clouds, the golden sunlight streaming through the cabin windows, illuminating faces blissfully unaware of the storm brewing above. Ethan Cole remained calm, outwardly just another passenger, yet every nerve in his body was alert. The rogue device had been neutralized, but his instincts screamed that this was only the beginning. Someone had orchestrated this entire sequence deliberately, a mastermind whose skill rivaled his own. And now, that shadowy hand was making itself known. Captain Maria Jensen glanced at him nervously. "Sir, there's something else," she whispered, uncertainty in her eyes. Ethan leaned slightly toward her, scanning the instruments. A subtle, almost imperceptible anomaly had appeared in the navigation system coordinates that weren't part of the original flight plan. "Someone's attempting to reroute us," he said softly. "This isn't mechanical. It's deliberate, and it's precise. We need to correct it before the F-35s interpret it as hostile deviation." Above, the F-35s observed the plane, cautious but maintaining formation. Ryan Davis furrowed his brow. The aircraft's telemetry remained smooth, yet minor adjustments suggested manipulation. "It's like someone is trying to guide the plane subtly," Davis muttered. "Not hostile, but deliberate. Calculated. Whoever it is knows the protocols." His wingman nodded, eyes wide with realization. It's not just a passenger. It's a strategist, someone with authority over this entire scenario. Ethan's mind raced. The signal originated from a sophisticated transmitter embedded within a portable system, likely planted on board weeks ago during maintenance. Whoever designed it had knowledge of both civilian aviation protocols and military operations. That level of planning indicated an insider, a former operative, someone familiar with high-stakes missions, likely intent on provoking a chain reaction that could escalate into disaster. He could feel the stakes escalating with every passing second. He leaned subtly toward the maintenance panel, concealing his actions from the cabin. The transmitter's signal was precise, adaptive, almost sentient in its design. Every attempt Ethan made to neutralize it was met with subtle countermeasures, delays, rerouted frequencies, and coded electronic pulses. This wasn't a simple rogue device. It was a trap, designed to test his skills, challenge his legacy, and manipulate Flight 228 into becoming a pawn in a larger game. The F-35s, sensing the subtle electronic fluctuations, adjusted formation slightly. Davis exchanged a tense glance with his wingman. Whatever this passenger is dealing with, it's not just a glitch. He's handling it. He's preventing escalation in real time. His wingman shivered. And he's doing it without us even knowing his identity. Recognition of Ugly Six had shifted from disbelief to cautious respect. They were witnessing a legend in action, orchestrating survival from within the cabin of a civilian aircraft. Ethan tapped into the signal, decrypting layers of encryption, designed to mimic civilian avionics and evade military detection. The mastermind's sophistication was evident every subroutine. Every reroute was crafted to appear harmless until a critical juncture. He could feel the tension rising in the plane's systems, subtle warnings that passengers would never notice, but that could trigger F-35 protocols if mishandled. Suddenly, another faint ping appeared, this one originating from outside the plane. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Someone was tracking them externally, coordinating with the onboard system. His mind raced. The mastermind was not content with passive observation. This was an active operation, designed to provoke, manipulate, and test both him and the military assets surrounding Flight 228. He realized that the final confrontation was imminent. He whispered to Captain Jensen, keeping his tone calm and commanding. Maintain current altitude and heading. Do not respond to any deviations unless instructed. Follow my lead precisely. This is about timing, precision, and control. One misstep could escalate the situation instantly. Jensen nodded, hands steady on the controls, trusting his guidance implicitly. Her confidence in him grew with every precise instruction. Above, the F-35s maintained formation, scanning for threats, yet hesitant to engage. Davis's mind raced. The passenger's control over the plane's systems was unprecedented. Whoever this is, he's keeping everyone safe, Davis muttered under his breath. He's orchestrating this entire operation, and we're just observers. His wingman's eyes widened in realization. We're witnessing a masterclass in aerial control. Ethan traced the external signal to a commercial satellite used for communication monitoring. The mastermind had cleverly piggybacked the signal through civilian infrastructure to obscure its origin. It was brilliant, subtle, and dangerous, designed to provoke a reaction without detection. His fingers worked quickly, rerouting communications, neutralizing the satellite's influence on the avionics, and ensuring the plane's systems remained stable. Every move was precise, calibrated to prevent escalation while maintaining control over Flight 228. Suddenly, the transmitter attempted one final maneuver, a subtle override of the plane's autopilot system, designed to trigger a minor course deviation. Ethan acted instantly, intercepting the signal, countering it with precise electronic pulses, and restoring stability. The plane's instruments returned to normal, the deviation corrected before it could trigger any F-35 response. Davis noticed the subtle stabilization and realized that the passenger was actively neutralizing the external interference. He's not just defending the aircraft. He's neutralizing threats we can't even see, Davis whispered, awe in his voice. His wingman nodded, comprehension dawning. This isn't just skill. It's genius. Ethan leaned back, assessing the situation. The mastermind's intentions were clear. Provoke a high-stakes scenario, test his abilities, and potentially manipulate Flight 228 into becoming a political or military incident. But now, with the rogue signals neutralized and the F-35s observing rather than threatening, he had the upper hand. The final phase of the confrontation was about to begin. He whispered to Captain Jensen, "We've neutralized the immediate threats. Prepare for manual navigation to final approach. Maintain calm. No sudden actions. We're not finished yet, but we are in control." Jensen nodded, her hands steady. Passengers remained unaware, engrossed in their routines, blissfully oblivious to the silent war above their heads. Ethan's eyes scanned the sky through the cockpit window. The F-35s, maintaining formation, waited for confirmation that Flight 228 posed no threat. Davis and his wingmen observed the plane's stability, realizing that the passenger was orchestrating a resolution with precision and authority. The legend of Ugly Six had come alive, guiding the plane through a carefully controlled scenario designed to test skill, timing, and nerves under pressure. Minutes passed. The rogue devices and external interference were neutralized. The F-35s recognized Flight 228 as secure, yet remained vigilant. Davis whispered quietly, almost in disbelief, "He's not just a passenger. He's a pilot, a tactician, and a guardian. And he's controlling every aspect without anyone noticing." His wingman nodded, shivering slightly. "This is unprecedented." Ethan allowed a brief exhale, but his vigilance remained. The mastermind had been revealed. The signals, the manipulations, the calculated attempts to provoke escalation were all designed to test him. He had neutralized them, maintained civilian safety, and coordinated with the military above, all without revealing his full identity. Yet he knew that the climax of this confrontation was approaching, final approach, landing and ensuring that Flight 228 reached its destination intact. The sun glinted off the wings one last time as Flight 228 continued through the clouds, stable and secure. Ethan remained calm, every movement precise, every calculation deliberate. Above, the F-35's continued escort, observers no more than potential threats. The quiet passenger in 14C had revealed his skills without exposing himself, safeguarding hundreds of lives and maintaining control over a scenario designed to provoke disaster. And high above, in the F-35 cockpits, LT, Ryan Davis whispered almost reverently, "Ugly Six. You're real. And you're airborne. And no one could have handled this like you." Flight 228 descended through the upper clouds, sunlight fading into the soft glow of the approaching horizon. The plane moved smoothly, every instrument stable, yet inside, Ethan Cole remained alert. Hundreds of lives depended on his precise calculations, calm judgment, and decades of hidden expertise. The rogue devices had been neutralized, the F-35s were satisfied, but the landing often, the most critical phase of any flight, remained the ultimate test. Captain Maria Jensen adjusted the controls slightly, keeping Flight 228 on course. "Sir, are you sure everything's fine for landing?" she asked, her voice steady yet tinged with residual tension. Ethan nodded. "Everything is stable. Maintain standard approach. Watch for any last-minute anomalies. The F-35s will continue to escort, but there should be no interference now." His tone conveyed authority without panic. Jensen's confidence in him had grown exponentially over the past hours. Outside, the F-35s adjusted to escort formation, one on each flank. LT, Ryan Davis observed the aircraft, eyes scanning for the slightest irregularity. Even after witnessing the passenger's mastery over the plane's systems, the level of calm authority in action was remarkable. "He's guiding her perfectly," Davis whispered to his wingman. "Every maneuver, every adjustment, flawless." His wingman's jaw tightened. And the passengers don't even know. Incredible. Ethan monitored the descent, calculating approach vectors, wind currents, runway alignment, and traffic control channels. Every variable was accounted for, every potential risk neutralized. The plane's systems remained responsive, the F-35s maintaining a careful but non-threatening presence. And passengers continued their routine, blissfully unaware of the near catastrophe they had narrowly avoided. The rogue mastermind's signal had been fully neutralized, but Ethan remained cautious. He knew that the previous attempts had been calculated, precise, and adaptive. There could still be residual interference, hidden contingencies, or even a final test designed to provoke errors. His hands moved with subtle precision over the avionics, ensuring all pathways were secured, communication channels stable, and autopilot algorithms synchronized with the descent path. Jensen glanced at him once more. "Sir, I have to say, I've never seen anyone handle a situation like this." Ethan offered a small, controlled smile. "Neither have I," he replied quietly, though inwardly he reflected on decades of training that had led to this moment. The calm exterior allied the years of experience, the ghost of past missions, and the unbroken instinct that had kept him alive long enough to guide Flight 228 safely. Minutes passed as the aircraft approached the airspace near the airport. Air traffic control communicated standard landing instructions, unaware of the extraordinary events in the skies above. Ethan relayed subtle adjustments to Jensen, ensuring that the descent was precise, smooth, and within all parameters. Every motion, every decision was calculated to prevent alarm, maintain stability, and avoid any misinterpretation from the F-35s or ground systems. Outside, the F-35s maintained formation, their presence both reassuring and tense. Davis watched the maneuvers, admiration evident in his eyes. "He's bringing it home perfectly," he murmured. "Every detail, every calculation. Flawless execution. I've never seen anything like it." His wingman nodded, the tension slowly lifting as Flight 228 continued its controlled descent. The legend of Ugly Six was no longer a myth. It was alive, decisive, and unwavering in the most critical moments. Inside the cabin, passengers remained oblivious. A child leaned against a parent, laughing softly. Couples exchanged quiet conversations, unaware that their safety depended on the precision of a single individual they had never even noticed. Flight attendants moved gracefully, serving drinks and smiles, while the quiet orchestration behind the scenes ensured that Flight 228 remained stable, secure, and on course. As the plane neared the runway, Ethan's hands remained poised over the controls, adjusting minor variances, compensating for wind shifts, and synchronizing all systems. Captain Jensen followed his instructions flawlessly, the duo functioning in perfect, unspoken harmony. The runway appeared ahead, lights glinting against the darkening evening sky. The F-35s held position, ready to provide observation, but no longer a threat. With one final calculation, Ethan guided Jensen through the landing. The wheels touched the runway smoothly, the descent flawless, and the aircraft rolled steadily to a halt. Applause erupted from passengers, unaware of the orchestration required to ensure safety. Jensen exhaled, hands shaking slightly, her relief palpable. "We made it. Thanks to you," she said softly, glancing at the unassuming passenger beside her. Ethan's calm demeanor remained intact, though a small smile crossed his face. "Just doing my job," he replied quietly. In the F-35 cockpits, Davis and his wingmen monitored the safe landing, their expressions a mixture of awe and respect. He didn't just land the plane. He controlled the skies, neutralized threats, and kept hundreds alive, Davis whispered. His wingmen nodded silently, understanding the significance of what they had just witnessed. Authorities met Flight 228 on the tarmac. Investigators boarded, initially confused by the absence of any noticeable threat. The rogue devices had been neutralized completely, leaving no evidence of interference. Passengers exited the aircraft, chatting, smiling, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded in the skies. Air traffic controllers reported unusual F-35 formations, but noted that the flight itself had landed perfectly, without incident. Ethan remained seated until the last passengers disembarked, ensuring that all systems were stable, that the plane was secure, and that no residual interference remained. Only then did he allow himself to relax, the tension of the past hours finally ebbing away. The legend of Ugly Six, once erased from history, had returned in the most extraordinary way, ensuring the safety of innocents while operating invisibly within the public sphere. Captain Jensen approached him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. Ethan merely nodded. "Stay safe. That's enough thanks for me." He rose, blending with the crowd, a quiet guardian whose actions had remained largely invisible, but whose impact was monumental. Davis and his wingmen returned to base, shaken yet awed. "Ugly Six. He's real," Davis said quietly. "And he's still flying." His wingmen nodded. "And no one will ever know what really happened up there." They understood that legends sometimes walked among the living, unseen, yet capable of extraordinary feats. As the airport lights dimmed behind him, Ethan walked away from Flight 228, his identity still secret, his past still classified, yet his actions undeniable. The passengers would remember only a smooth, uneventful flight. The world outside would remain unaware of the near disaster averted in the skies above. But for those trained to see, for those who understood skill, precision, and courage, Ugly Six had returned. And in the quiet hum of his thoughts, Ethan allowed himself a moment of reflection. He had returned to the skies not as a passenger, but as a protector, a tactician, and a legend reborn. The story of Flight 228 would remain untold to the world, yet in the hearts and minds of those who witnessed his subtle mastery, the name Ugly Six would resonate forever. The legend had landed safely, but the skies remained his domain.